This is Garmin's new Forerunner 165. It's basically Garmin's entry-level running watch. And I say basically because technically Garmin is still making the Forerunner 55, but at this point, I don't really think anyone is going to consider that as a realistic option. For $50 more, or for $250, this Garmin Forerunner 165 is perfect for almost every runner, tons of swimmers out there, and some cyclists. And yet, it still doesn't have triathlon as an activity option. It's also missing some other features that seem really odd. So let's dig into this. Okay, real quickly, if you don't have a ton of time and you just want to kind of get my quick thoughts on this watch, this is a watch that I'm going to be recommending to a ton of runners out there. I actually coach about 100 runners, and this is probably going to be my top choice for them to consider. You know, I don't love recommending expensive watch devices, and this one it's at least on the more affordable side of things at $250 or $300 for the music edition. And typically I'm not gonna recommend music edition for people. I guess I'm just cheap, I don't know. But I do like the color options that are on the music editions of this watch. Before we get into how accurate this watch is, or other watches for you guys to consider, or my overall opinions on this watch, I want to talk about all of the options that you have to deal with when buying the Garmin Forerunner 165. So there are 6 total color options to choose from, but only 2 of them are part of the non-music editions. So that is black and slate gray, or mist gray and white stone. Then if you're willing to spend the extra $50 for the music edition, you've got those same mist gray, white stone, and black slate gray colors, but you also have berry lilac in this turquoise aqua color, and that's the color that I'm gonna be showing throughout this video. Now, while we're talking about music, the music editions have about 4 gigs of total memory. So some of that is used up by the watch operating systems, but after that, you end up with about 2.5 gigs left for music storage. And you can sync music over from streaming companies like Spotify or Deezer, or you can drop MP3 files directly on the device. And you can connect this device directly to Bluetooth headphones or a Bluetooth speaker for some reason if you wanted to do that. But the biggest and the most obviously distinguishing feature of this new Forerunner 165 is easily this extremely vibrant 1.2-inch AMOLED screen. It is a very nice display. And I wouldn't say it's like a massive display by any means, but it provides a very sharp image. Screen resolution is 390 by 390 pixels. Here's how this watch looks on my very small, but still very manly 165 millimeter wrists. And here's how it looks on my wife's wrist, just for your reference. It's 43 millimeters in diameter, and it's only about 11.5 inches in depth. I always think that it's the depth of these watches that really makes them feel big and bulky. And this watch is definitely not big or bulky. It's just quite a nice, slim little watch we've got here. The watch band is also pretty slim. It's a 20 millimeter quick fit compatible watch band from Garmin. It's made of silicone. I actually think it's nice. It's not something that I would personally change out for something different. But if you do want to, these quick fit compatible bands are really easy to find on Amazon or wherever you buy your watch bands, and you can probably find one for, you know, anywhere from like 10 to 20 bucks. I'll try to find some links for you guys and leave them in the description of this video. But if we actually take this watch and flip it over, we'll see Garmin's 4th generation optical heart rate monitor on here. Garmin actually calls this their Elevate optical heart rate sensor. And I've actually had pretty good results with this heart rate sensor over the past month or 2 that I've actually been testing this watch. I do actually have watches with Garmin's newer 5th generation heart rate sensor. And I've actually tried to tease out any sort of slight improvements from the 4th generation to the 5th generation. I don't know, it's pretty hard to tell with these things. But this heart rate sensor doesn't have the option to perform an ECG like the 5th generation optical heart rates have. But the heart rate data that I've been seeing has been pretty solid. Here, have a quick look at this chart. In this case, I'm actually wearing 3 watches, one Garmin Epix 2 that's actually connected to a heart rate strap, and technically using a heart rate strap like this should be the most accurate way to actually get heart rate data. So I kind of think of this as like our control, but there might be one spot in here where it actually looks like it's reading a little bit high. All of these watches seem to take a little bit of time over those first 2 minutes or so just to kind of lock onto my heart rate. And that's actually pretty typical of these optical heart rate monitors. But then I see one slight issue here when running this 7-miler where I take a little break at the turnaround, and it seems like it takes the 165 just a little bit longer to dip down and catch that lower heart rate. So I don't have a ton of concerns when it comes to the heart rate data on this particular watch, but this heart rate sensor, it actually does have the option to show you your SpO2 or your oxygen saturation of your blood. Actually, Garmin calls this their pulse ox feature. It might be something that you're interested in keeping an eye on if you are traveling to altitude, because that will lower your blood oxygen saturation levels. Otherwise, it really should be in those upper 90 levels. You do have the option to turn that feature off, or you can use it in an all-day mode, or you can actually just have it turned on while you're sleeping. I actually suggest that you be a little bit picky about which option you choose, just because that feature does drain the battery a good bit. Now, speaking of battery life, I would say that the Forerunner 165, it doesn't have the most massive amount of battery life when you kind of compare it to a lot of the other watches on the market. Here's another chart for us to look at. So this Forerunner 165 is a very small watch with a very bright and battery intensive AMOLED display, and there's just not a ton of room for a battery on this thing. For me, I'm personally seeing about 4 days of usage for battery life, where I'm doing somewhere around an hour of battery intensive GPS activities per day. And I actually use this watch in its always on display mode, but by default, it comes in that raise to wake mode. And in that mode, you'll see about 11 days of battery life before you'll actually need to recharge the device. But comparing this watch to a few other watches that I thought you might want to consider when you're considering this watch, the normal Apple watches are about 1 day. And then if you're willing to, give up on these AMOLED displays, the MIP style displays or memory and pixel displays, they're not quite as sharp as these, they're not quite as bright, but they still look solid outdoors. Something like the Coros Pace 3, which I reviewed just a week ago, is actually gonna go for about 2 weeks. Similar with the Garmin Forerunner 255, which is a fantastic option. And then there's kind of 2 ways to display battery life. So if we zoom in here, we can actually look at GPS battery life. Again, GPS is pretty battery intensive. So if you are interested in doing something like a 100-mile ultra run, battery life on this watch might not get you there. I don't know, maybe if you're really, really fast, like you're a fast ultra runner, maybe you can make that work. But you can expect about 19 hours in its most basic GPS only mode, or about 17 hours in its all systems GNSS mode. And that's probably the mode that I would expect you guys to use this watch in most of the time. That's actually how it's set up by default, and that's actually how I've been testing this watch recently. It's basically a little bit more accurate GPS, but either of these modes, whichever one you're using, it's really just a trade-off between GPS accuracy and battery life. There is an ultra track mode. I don't think that you guys will probably use it unless you're maybe doing some sort of multi-day hike or something like that. The problem with this mode is you do lose a ton of accuracy. I actually haven't tested it with this particular watch, but in previous testing, running with this mode on, I'm seeing a loss of about 17% as far as accuracy goes when measuring distances. But if you need the battery life, I think it's nice to know that you have that as an option in a pinch. Now Now the Forerunner 165 does not have a dual frequency mode. Again, I know a ton of you guys are really interested in that. If you're not familiar with that, it's the mode where the watch can actually connect to multiple types of satellite systems at the same time to really increase accuracy. And for the most part, I think it really does kind of come in handy when you're running next to like a sheer rock wall, or you're running in a dense city and you've got skyscrapers where GPS signals might bounce off of different things and cause issues. But I'm gonna go out on a little bit of a limb here. And I actually think that that whole dual frequency mode is a little bit overrated. Definitely, you guys let me know in the comment section if you think I'm wrong. But I've actually been seeing a lot of solid GPS tracks with this watch without that dual frequency mode. And I actually have this sneaking suspicion that it actually has a ton more to do with antenna design on these watches, the power that they're actually providing these GPS chips, and maybe the custom firmware that's actually running on these GPS chips, really like discarding bad GPS data. Either way, like however Garmin is getting good GPS out of this watch, dual frequency or no dual frequency, it's just nice to see that this watch is tracking really well here. Now, if you are familiar with any of Garmin's more recent devices, navigating around on the Garmin Forerunner 165 is gonna be pretty straightforward. There's 5 total buttons. There's this top right one with the word run engraved in it in here, and it acts as your selection button, or from the home screen, it actually pulls up all of the different activity types that you can do. I think that there's over 30 different sports profiles in here that you can choose from, but the bottom left button navigates the watch down through any lists, or of course you can use the touch screen. I just generally prefer to use buttons if I have them as an option. That kind of middle button on the left, it actually navigates up on any sort of list. There's also a top button on the left that turns on and off the full brightness of the AMOLED display. If you actually hold that button, it'll actually pull up another quick menu, which is customizable. But in here, you'll see stuff like being able to turn the watch into its sleep mode, or you can actually pull up Garmin Pay, which is Garmin's NFC payment feature. It's kind of like Apple Pay or Google Pay if you've ever used either of those two features on your smartphone. There's also a flashlight on this menu system in here. So you can use this bright AMOLED screen as a flashlight with 3 different levels of brightness in a red light mode. And going through every single feature on this watch would definitely make for a very, very long video. But from the home screen, I do wanna show you guys, if we scroll down, we can see Garmin's widget area on this device. In here, you'll see stuff like how long your watch thinks you need to recover based on your recent sleep and the activities that you've been up to. So on here, showing quite a bit of time. Hopefully I'll be able to be fully recovered here before maybe tomorrow morning's run. We'll see. But there's also an HRV metric on here, and that means heart rate variability. HRV is a fantastic way to see how your cardiovascular system is recovering from day-to-day stress. But basically, you can think of it like higher HRV means your body is more ready to take on like a vigorous workout, whereas lower means that you may need more recovery time. The watch has a weather details widget as well. There's also music controls in here. There's this body battery metric, which is just kind of another way to visualize recovery. You can think of it like you get a great night's sleep, your score would be at 100, and then throughout the day, as you do activities and other stressors, your body battery would slowly deplete. There's other stuff in here. There's just like a general heart rate widget in here. You can track your steps in here. There's your sleep score. And I should actually say that I really love Garmin sleep tracking and their morning report in particular. So after a night's sleep, it'll give you all of these little details, a nice full report on how you slept, probably how you're recovering. It'll show you your suggested workouts, and it'll actually show you the weather for the day. All of it's actually customizable. You can go into the settings section of the watch and then look under notifications and alerts if you want to customize your morning report. So there's a ton more in here. It'll actually track your naps, for example. There's something new in here called Sleep Coach. I don't personally put too much stock in it, but it'll try to suggest how much sleep you might need for that particular evening. And there's a ton more features within this watch. I'm really only scraping the surface of all the stuff that you can do with this watch. That's not even counting the actual software part that comes on the mobile application. Garmin calls their mobile application, and actually the accompanying web application, they call that their Garmin Connect system, and it's actually quite fantastic. There's no subscription fee required to use it. It's all part of just owning a Garmin watch. With it, you can dive really deep on any sort of recent activity that you've done. You can do things like earn badges. So if you're into kind of gamifying your fitness, you can do that. And Garmin recently redesigned this Garmin Connect app. I know at least some of you guys are disappointed with the redesign. For me, it's not a huge deal. For the most part, I'm mainly using it to sync all of my watch data into the cloud where it can be picked up by other services. I like to use Strava, for example. So I have a ton of nice things to say about the Forerunner 165. However, there are a few things that I really wish were different about this device. We could call this section, we could call it like our why Garmin why. But I already talked about this a little bit. I actually love all of the cool color options that this watch has, but it seems to me like they're all kind of tied to the music edition. Personally, I don't really need music, but I would, however, love to save that extra $50. I don't know. Why Garmin why? This watch also has really fantastic activity tracking. You've got stuff like outdoor track running, trail running, ultra running. You've got indoor cycling, you've got outdoor cycling, you've got lap swimming, and even open water swimming. Garmin has all of these options on this watch, but there's no activity type for triathlon. You have to bump all the way up to the Forerunner 255 or the 265. The 255 is actually on sale right now, but you have to bump up to the higher end devices to get that triathlon option. Not sure why Garmin. You've got all the activity types that are needed. You just kind of have to put them together for this triathlon mode. And you'll actually see competitive options from brands like Apple. All of the Apple watches, I think, have a triathlon mode. The Coros Pace 3, which I mentioned earlier, that's actually a little bit cheaper than the Forerunner 165, and that includes a triathlon mode as an option. So I do think that Garmin should consider adding it to this watch. Lastly, Garmin includes running power with this watch, but not support for cycling power meters, which seems like an odd omission to me. Just to be clear, this watch has Bluetooth, it has ANT+, it has Wi-Fi connectivity options, so it seems like it's got all of the hardware on here to support something like cycling power meters. And this watch is also missing other stuff too, like it's missing support for all of the different skiing activity types, all of the different climbing activity types, and it has a barometric altimeter. So my theory is that Garmin is just arbitrarily drawing a little line in the sand at a given price point and requiring buyers to just spend more money to get some of these features. And I kind of understand that. You've kind of got to somehow separate this watch from the 265 and the 965. I just wish that the limitations were strictly hardware limitations. So watch A doesn't have an altimeter, it doesn't get things like stair climbing details or skiing, or watch B doesn't have enough onboard memory, it doesn't get mapping, or maybe it doesn't get music. As opposed to what appears to me as some sort of random decision to leave features out of certain watches, or maybe leaving features out based on price. Another example of this actually might be something like the training readiness score, which is another somewhat newer metric from Garmin, which gives you a value of 1 to 100 on how ready you are to train for that particular day. It's basically a combination of a lot of other factors like your sleep and your recent activities and how strenuous that particular activity was, even factors like your overall stress throughout the day. But it's an odd metric that Garmin seems to really only reserve for their higher end devices. Maybe one more minor nitpicky complaint here. I don't love the fact that the top right button has run engraved in it here. The thing is, this is probably one of the best swimming watches on the market. If someone asked me for a swimming watch recommendation, I don't know. I don't really think that there's a lot more that I would recommend besides this watch. I think AMOLED screens do a great job when you're lap swimming and you want to glance at the time or see something when you're underwater. And I'll definitely be recommending this watch to a ton of swimmers out there. And all of this is just to say, I think the running branding on this watch could just be like toned down just a little bit. Again, definitely weird coming from me, just a guy who basically spent his entire life obsessing over the sport of running. But maybe after all of this, you think that I really hate the Garmin Forerunner 165. After all of my complaints, after all of my suggestions for improvements, but that actually couldn't be further from the truth. I do think I'm a little bit harder on Garmin, just because I do think that they make really good watches. And with any of these reviews, I always try to find, potential issues or at least a few things that I wish would be changed on any of these devices. And like I said at the top of this video, I really do like this watch a lot. It's a watch that I'm definitely gonna be fully recommending to a ton of runners that I coach, and probably a fair amount of swimmers that are out there. Other comparable watches that might be something that you wanna check out, I mentioned the Coros Pace 3 a ton of times throughout this video. It does have a more battery-friendly memory and pixel display. It also offers that triathlon mode, which is nice. Another option might be something like Garmin's Forerunner 255 or their Forerunner 265. Main difference being that the 265 has that nicer AMOLED display and the 255 has the memory and pixel display. Both of which are wonderful watches, and it might actually be something that you can find on sale. I'm seeing the 255 on a pretty good discount at the time of making this video. Again, I'll leave links to the best places that I can find all of these devices down in the description of this video, as well as I'll pin a comment to the top of this video so you can find it. And just another size comparison here, the Apple Watch Series 7, this is actually the 41mm option, and actually Apple with their Series 9 now, they're on the Series 9, but they're actually fantastic watches. Heart rate sensors are excellent. They provide very accurate heart rate data, and the GPS accuracy is also good on these devices. And like I mentioned earlier, it also has triathlon as an option. So there are a ton of other great options on the market for runners. So when it comes down to it, you're probably asking, would I recommend the 165 over everything else? And of course, obviously, it does depend. If you're looking for something with triathlon, obviously not. But for a lot of runners out there, the answer is going to be yes. Does it have issues? Also yes. But I do think that most of the issues are really just, me complaining or whining about some sort of small feature that's missing from a very budget-friendly device. But what do you guys think? Is the Forerunner 165 something that you would consider? Do you have this device? What do you think of it? Do you think that Garmin should have left a few more features in here? What else do you guys think people should consider at or around this price point? I'm super happy to continue any of these conversations down in the comment section of this video. Comment section is just below the like button and the subscribe button down there. But either way, GPS watch or no watch at all, I really do hope that you guys are getting out there, swimming, biking, running, rinsing, and repeating it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.